All right, welcome everybody to October 12th, 6 p.m. Pacific time. And for those in Hong Kong, it is October 13th. Welcome. And happy to have you here for our October Scrum and Wine. I'm super excited about our guest speaker tonight, Zohar Mann. And he's going to be talking about turning a battleship of cats, coaching 200 Agile teams. Pretty cool. Many of us are saying, I haven't even coached 2 teams, let alone 200. So we'll be able to hear his story. Very excited about that. We're going to start off with small bites. I kind of introduce what's happening in the world of Agile and Scrum, so you can choose to find new events. For many of us, we never have a chance to do our own research, so I'd like to kind of share what's going on. So let me start off with that. All right, so first thing I'd like to share is I've got a couple upcoming certified Scrum developer classes, and these have been amazing. I love teaching these. I teach these with Ivan Biddles. He's my co-partner for teaching. And we have a Scrum developer class starting next week and another one in December that'll wrap up our 2022 for Scrum developer classes. So if you haven't had a chance to do this, if you're an Agile coach, Scrum Master, product owner, leader, this class is for everybody. We have built this class and designed this class for everybody. When you get into some of the advanced classes, like the Advanced Certified Scrum Developer and so forth, those classes are geared towards the programmers that are actually building the product. But for the Scrum Developer, we want everybody to go because you're all involved in building a product. So we've got that for everybody. So if you're interested in that, check it out. We give 10% off to all Scrum and Wine members. You just use Scrum and Wine at checkout. All right, so what's upcoming? What's upcoming next week? So next week is the Global Scrum Gathering in Lisbon. First one back in Europe since before COVID, since we shut down. This is a hybrid event, meaning you can go in person, which would be awesome, or you can attend virtually. There are going to be many of the speakers will speak and you'll hear them both, either if you're in person or online, you'll hear them in real time. And there are some events that are specifically geared towards virtual or online learning. We call it kind of Lisbon and beyond. It's just pretty cool. I was part of the Denver team that we did a few months back, and we did Denver and beyond, and we did a hybrid event too. Pretty awesome. So if you're available to come to that virtually or in person, love to have you that. They're great events. They're some of my favorites for sure. All right, another upcoming one here is the International Conference on Agile Software Development Methods and Patterns. This is coming up on October 27th, 28th. It's here in Los Angeles. This aims to bring together leading academic scientists, researchers, and research scholars to exchange and share their experience and research results on all aspects of Agile software development methods and patterns. It provides a premier interdisciplinary platform for researchers, practitioners, and educators to present and discuss the most recent innovation, trends, and concerns, as well as practical challenges encountered and solutions adopted in the fields of Agile software development, the methods and the patterns for that. So check that out. Go look for that at ICAS DMP 2022. That's upcoming. Okay, next one, which I'm really kind of passionate about. I've been involved in this for several years. This is Agile Games Online, formerly known as Agile Games West, for those of you who might have been familiar with it. So this will be online this year. Before the pandemic, we did it in person in the San Francisco Bay Area. Berkeley was the last one I was at. Agile Games Online is an immersive and fun learning experience that arms you with tools, tips, and tricks to take back to your teams and gamify agility. It mashes up agility with fun and interactive Agile games. Play, learn, network with the industry gurus, and help advance your career. There will be a lot of games, interesting speakers, and key network opportunities. You'll enrich your facilitation styles and carry excellent ways that you can implement with your teams right away. Whether you're a Scrum Master, product owner, or a member of the Scrum team, anyone can benefit from these. This is at agilegamesonline.com. I know there's a limited number of tickets. I hope to be one of the game presenters. I've submitted my proposal to be a game presenter for that. So I'm looking forward to that. Okay, for those of you on the East Coast, you might appreciate this. This is Agile and DevOps East. This is coming up in early November. It's in Orlando, Florida, and online. Discover the latest in Agile and DevOps methods, tools, and leadership practices. Get ideas and inspiration from experts and peers. Agile and DevOps East brings together practitioners seeking to accelerate the delivery of reliable, secure software applications. Find out how the practice of Agile and DevOps brings cross-functional stakeholders together to deliver software with greater speed and agility while meeting quality and security demands. Learn from industry experts how your organization can leverage Agile and DevOps concepts to improve deployment frequency and time to market, reduce the lead time, and more successfully deliver stable new features. agiledevopseast.techwell.com. All right, next up, a new one we haven't talked about yet. So Austin, keep Austin agile. The 10th annual Reconnect, Reenergize, Reengage. This is coming up in also early November. By popular request, Agile Austin is proud to announce the return of Agile in-person Keep Austin Agile Conference in the fall of 2022 in a brand new format. Our first hybrid conference will not only enable us to see familiar faces and meet some new colleagues, again in person, but also offer the opportunity for remote participation, all live online with moderated breakout sessions. So if you can't be in Austin, you can join virtually. With so many persons returning to work and other gatherings in person while others are also working remotely, either in part or holistically, connecting with your colleagues is an essential need for today's volatile and uncertain environment. Come learn from the best thought leaders in how to craft and sustain, how to contribute and thrive in a blended world. Wednesday, November 9th. You can find this by searching for Austin Agile Conference. Okay, next up, Agile Lean International Conference, 16th and 17th of November. This is by the community for the community. Agile Lean International traces its roots to the Dublin Agile community from the early to mid 2010s. We have grown to become the largest Agile Lean meetup group in Ireland with several thousand members. Our meetups have been a mix of presentation by local practitioners and international experts, workshops, Lean coffee, and lightning talks. We were one of the first, possibly the first, to use video conferencing to bring international experts to a local audience. In 2017, we established a conference. This has grown year on year and has been recognized as one of the best Agile conferences in the tech world by Tech Beacon. Agile Lean International 2020, our most recent conference, was a multi-track 2-day conference with speakers and delegates from around the world. In recent years, we have experimented with expanding locally by running events in Carlo and internationally with a conference in Frankfurt. It is a volunteer-led with a small cohort of 6 coordinating the conference, supported by 30+ volunteers and other loyalists who are dispersed around the world. Check that out. Get a little Irish coffee, as we were talking about earlier. The Conference on Agility. This is coming up in December. This is Germany and online, a conference that focuses on the exchange about agility in teams and companies at all levels. This ranges from the sense and nonsense of using tools and their optimal use in Agile software teams to scaling Agile models and processes across entire organizations. What is particularly important to us, an open exchange at eye level, pragmatic solutions, interactive elements, a personal atmosphere, and high quality lectures or contributions on the cutting edge. Diverse subjects has always thrived on a large thematic diversity. This is also reflected in 2022 in the 8 tracks offered, in which appropriate lectures and discussion rounds are classic. Also exciting things, in details, we have Agile teamwork, Agile leadership, Agile product management, scaling Agile, modern workplace, Agile IT service management, a culture lounge, and Agile games. Not a conference, but something everybody should download and review is the 2022 State of Agile Coaching Report. This is the 2nd annual report that has been published through Scrum Alliance in partnership with Business Agility and IC Agile. The 2nd edition focuses on one question: how do Agile coaches and the organizations they serve measure impact? 2nd edition of the survey. This coaching report is gathered from data from over 2,000 professional Agile coaches like you and me, who share their input on the impact of Agile coaching. return on investment, value, and the measurement to define success. The State of Agile Coaching Report, I mentioned, is published by Business Agility, IC Agile, and Scrum Alliance. Check that out on Scrum Alliance. You can download it there, and I'd recommend you do and look through it. All right, next thing, you need guidance on your transformation journey. Everybody kind of needs guidance on their transformation journey. Check out Kadomi.co. This is our branded approach. It's my vision to bring and help organizations through the journey. There are a lot of scaling opportunities out there, but you need somebody to guide you through that. So let us be your Agile guide. In order to accomplish a transformation to an Agile coacher, we developed Kadomi. It's a scaled Agile transformation framework to guide your organization from their current state towards agility. It's done by establishing enterprise-wide Agile teams, forming Agile leaders, and measuring progress along the Agile journey. The Kadomi ecosystem, we understand that each organization's transfer journey is unique. We created this as an adaptable and customizable framework to consist of the teams, programs, and products to act as your Agile guide. To go along with this, we've launched what we call Kadomi Tools. Kadomi Tools has two really cool tools on there, a sprint capacity planner and an agility metrics engine. We have both a free, a premium, and an enterprise version, so you can use it for your entire organization. Whether you want to look at team capacity with yesterday's weather to figure out how much should we do for our next sprint, including Kaizen and interrupts, right? We can take a look at that. Here's another view of some of the dashboards and tools that are on there. And we've launched some new features recently. So if you haven't checked it out recently, or you were one of our beta testers originally, the enterprise version, we now have a coaching overlay. So if your team is measuring their agility, the coach can also measure the agility of the team and say, do I see different? Do I see different? Do I see the same? And we can now have conversations to guide them on that journey. So it's a pretty awesome tool. I'm super excited about it. So get on there, kadomitools.com, learn it. There are also now some coaching rubrics available too. So if you're an Agile coach, you can measure, how am I doing? How am I helping my organizations? All right, with that, let me introduce Zohar Mann. Over the last decade at Salesforce, Zohar has spoken at Dreamforce, cultural panel discussions, AMA sessions, tech deep dives, new hire orientations, and has taught numerous Agile courses to hundreds of engineers. Zohar came to Agile coaching from a leadership background as the creator of the Chaos Engineering program at Salesforce. Prior to Salesforce, he was a global IT architect at IBM and ran data storage engineering at Disney. He is deeply passionate about building strongly connected, happy teams that consistently innovate. All right, let me introduce Zohar, and Zohar's going to take us away with our topic for today. So Zohar, over to you. I'll stop sharing and give you the sharing capability.
Thank you very much, Sherman. Give me 1 second to present here. Let's see if this works. Okay, hopefully you should now see a slide with a safe harbor block of text.
Yep.
Yes, we do.
Okay. Great. So, hey, everybody. Thanks for the opportunity to present. This is a topic I'm pretty passionate about. It's pretty much my daily work for the last 4 years as an Agile coach at Salesforce. I'm going to start with this safe harbor. It's something we're kind of obligated to put up whenever we talk about Salesforce stuff. It's just the sort of de facto statement of make any business purchase decisions based on what's commercially available on the market right now, and not anything I'm saying in this presentation. So I'll leave it at that. It's important because we're an Agile company, so the plan changes as it must. Okay. So I don't need to introduce myself. Sherman just did a very nice job of reading my block of text, so thank you for that. I'll just qualify. I started in biology and moved into biotech and then moved into tech. So it's basically lab coat to pocket protector at some point. The journey to becoming an agile coach at Salesforce is a weird one. It's now we hire agile coaches, but historically it was just somebody brought up through the org. It's sort of title agnostic. So we have people like VPs from engineering that come over and start coaching. So it's an interesting role. Now we're hiring people with specific training and people who come from more of an agile background as it's become more of a discipline in the industry. So that's nice to see. And the team grew from, originally probably 0 coaches to a handful in Salesforce. And now I think we're at over 60 coaches scattered throughout Salesforce. So it's kind of exciting to see that trend. Gosh, the wrestling with the Zoom presentation a little bit. Okay. So one thing I should probably address is the name of this, the Battleship of Cats. It came about through one of my colleagues mentioned when we were talking about sort of the slow rate of change and trying to have impact at scale that, we don't always see the impact. So we make a change and it takes a while. And he was saying, we're trying to turn a battleship. And the idea is that it's something large. It has a lot of inertia and it takes a while to, I guess there's something about a battleship taking like 20 miles to make a full turn. Hopefully they're getting faster. So I like the metaphor. It's small changes taking a while to impact that inertia. When they said that, I just added that it was a battleship of cats, meaning it's like this, constantly changing group of entities that don't want to be told what to do and tend to be a little bit chaotic. There's a function of entropy that happens with that battleship. It's not that tightly run in a lot of cases. So that's the metaphor. Maybe more interesting is the idea on a battleship of force multipliers. And I kind of like that part of it, that somebody is presumably turning a wheel in a wheelhouse on that ship. And through a system of, who knows, wires and hydraulics and duct tape, it turns into a force multiplier where at the rudder, it's thousands of tons of force that are being shifted by that small turning of the wheel. And we like the metaphor of force multipliers because we like to think that the small things we're doing as coaches are hopefully having large impact somewhere along the way. So that said, a couple of the things I'm going to talk about. I'll try to be fast so we can have a good discussion with this group. But I'm going to talk about the strategy of how we went into the large org that I'm a part of, a framework for execution, how we then measure throughout, and then at the end, and I think this is probably a pretty important part, is sort of celebrating the improvements. So the landscape. I'm a part of Salesforce engineering that's called security engineering. It is, when I came in, it was 2 of us as coaches. It was a 1,000-person organization. Over time, it has scaled to now 2,100 people, and they've given us 2 additional headcounts. So we have 4 coaches coaching the 2,100 people. It breaks out to about 200 teams, depending on the day. The teams kind of come and go. And it's very geographically distributed. So we have teams, this picture gives you a little bit of an idea. This is not all of the countries those teams are in. Everyone is working from home now, for the most part. And so we are in basically all of the non-adjacent time zones. So that said, given that landscape and trying to influence them to change, how did that come about? It started with an earnest conversation. And one of the things that I think helps is, at least at Salesforce, the Agile coaches are not in the organization that we're trying to coach. So I sit outside of that organization. I am not in their management chain. And so it allows me to be somewhat title agnostic. I don't have to worry about my performance review being impacted by telling someone, giving them blunt feedback. I can sort of exist peripherally within this large organization. So it helps. And I think in some regard, it helps with trust, where the leaders were able to speak openly about some of the challenges they were facing within their org, because I'm not really a part of it. So that helps, and I find that's a useful part. I know not all of us can do that, or some of us come in completely externally, probably as consultants, but I think it's something to be aware of. Another thing that was very useful in the beginning of this engagement was that they're seeking change, and it's easy to say that, but to really embrace it and understand what it looks like when you start to roll it out into a large org, you get every sort of use case and edge case, and people will push back on the change. And on top of that, you have to sort of figure out how to strike a balance. Working with a security org, they're very compliance oriented. And so sometimes we'll make a suggestion as to, if you ask a Socratic question about what's a good way to implement the change that you seek, they'll just roll it out with no testing and no phased deployment. They're just going to tell everyone, this is what you must do, and it is compliance oriented, and this is the new way of things. And not everyone will welcome that with open arms, and it will create more churn and unwanted attrition. So trying to balance mandates versus being too Socratic and asking too many open questions is something we've struggled with over the years. We're actually trending this year towards being a little bit more stringent in how we roll out standards, but I'll talk more about that. The other concept is doing sort of an earnest baseline of where the org is at, and then talking about where do you want to be and what does that look like, and how would you measure that. This is where your SMART goals come in, and you want everything to be measurable and time bound, and something that you can actually measure and achieve over the desired year, or whatever your time frame might be for your engagement. It seems like it's never ending in the one I'm in. The other idea is talking explicitly about how to get there. And I bring this up now because at the beginning of the engagement is usually your best opportunity to get commitments from the leadership that you're talking to. So for instance, if you want to have a cadence of meetings, you probably want to get that commitment up front. You probably want to get named executive sponsors. You want to establish who your partners are for specific parts of the initiatives. You want to, one that I think is important, every time I have a meeting with my stakeholders, I have asks. I try to make sure those asks are happening every time. And I think it's an important part. It's not just a reporting of status. So you need their buy-in, and you need it represented. We've done things like ask them to record a video, sort of espousing the values that we share and things like that. Another big part of this is to make sure that anything you agree in terms of metrics and actions, that they're prioritized within the organization's other priorities. I'll talk a little bit more about that as well, but having them prioritized and having them propagated. So whatever mechanism work is tracked strategically and tactically, you want to make sure the Agile components are equally important and tracked exactly the same way. So if it's a technology org and they have a bug threshold that they're trying to maintain for the year, the Agile metrics should be right in there and ideally reported in the same venues with the same level of importance. So this is an artifact that's specific to Salesforce. Maybe other companies have adopted it. It's something Benioff came up with when he founded the company. And it's called the V2MON. It's an acronym: vision, values, methods, measures, and obstacles. I don't know why they put the O in the middle. Maybe it sounds better. So what do I want to tell you about this? This one is significant. This is how everyone at Salesforce tracks their plan for the year. And it's okay if it changes. It has periodic reviews. There's like a top level org one, and it's propagated throughout, and everyone copies the relevant parts for theirs and adds things that are specific to their plan for the year. But I think this is important because when we talk about that concept of are we on the same page, this is literally that page. We are all able to see everybody's V2 mom. And so more often than not, if I see a disconnect in how work is flowing throughout the org, I tend to call the organization is so big that everything's an issue of scale, but I call it the plaid because there's so many services and there's so many interdependent components that it just looks like a big weird plaid design if you visualize it. Anytime I see a breakdown, it often hails back to something at the V2 mom level not being honored. And we can go back and look at it, and it's that same page. Another thing that's important about it is it's prioritized. When it is written, the order in which things are shown show the priority of delivery throughout the year. So it's useful when there's any contention over priority. Again, this is important because if we're trying to institute change and have some specific measurable agile components to an org changing, we want to make sure that they're documented within the whole org's V2 mom, and we want to see them propagated from the top of the org throughout, like we call it leadership at the team, which is the LT, the extended leadership team, which is like all the management. So in my org, there's probably about 150 middle management folks. We want all of them to have the agile measures reflected in their V2 mom and prioritized, so we can all refer back to that as something we want to accomplish within the year. So this is functionally the organization's backlog. So that brings us to some of the problem statements. When I came in as a coach, I heard a few different versions of what I thought was a similar problem. So I had the leadership saying, we know all the engineers are working really hard, but they aren't delivering what we want. I had program managers saying, my name is attached to this large initiative, but it's I don't know how to turn it into work that the engineers can deliver, that I can report on. And then the engineers saying that we just constantly live in a reactive state and have no control over our world, and everything is just thrown at us and no one seems to care until something breaks. So to me, all of that was a gap between what they were working on, and we have what I call the system of record. This is, like your Jira. In our case, it's a system that is on Salesforce, but it's like the ticketing system, the work system, the project management system, the system of record that everybody works in. And then what I call the source of truth, which is that V2 mom. If those two things are not connected, then what you're working on is not tightly correlated to the strategic plan. So I think within the first week of coaching, I just proposed a way to bring those two systems together. So the reality of what people work on is, reflected in the strategic plan. This is not strictly agile. This gets into a bit of portfolio management, but that was really important. And the opportunity it afforded us, not only just for the org to run a little more cleanly and integrate these sort of two disparate systems, but it allowed us to also inject the agile measures that we wanted for the org into that system. So they are executing on agile initiatives the same way they're executing on development initiatives or run the business initiatives. So for us, that's a really important part. So how do we do all of this? I've talked about aligning the plans with the leadership and the extended leadership. It's documented and everyone agrees it's really important and it's something they want to accomplish. But what are the tools we use? So the toolbox, I'm going to give these in a sort of semblance of order, but there is no order. It's basically all the tools all the time is what I find. There's, and this is going to be everything. So in terms of creating content, we create video content, we create documented content. We have, we find that people like, short 3-bullet instruction lists. They don't like pages of instructions. We create those all the time. We create trailheads within Salesforce that are like graphically appealing trails on how to do certain things. So we create content all the time. Then we need channels in which to distribute the content. And that's, again, everything all of the time. We're constantly marketing all of this. We're asking the leaders to do recordings. We're sending it out as email. We're broadcasting on Slack. We are sending out links. What else? We've built a community of practice within Slack where I force added all of the Scrum leads and product owners and managers, so they have to see everything all of the time when we send out these sort of broadcasts. We have office hours. We try to get in 5-minute windows on any meeting we can. So if there's an all hands meeting, we ask for 5 minutes to talk about the state of Agile and the team health. When there's a operational emergency meeting, we sometimes try to get in like really any channel we can get heard and get a little sliver of time and share some of the content and some of the success stories. We strive for it. Distributed nodes of expertise. So 4 coaches don't scale very well over 180, 200 teams. We just can't embed with all of those teams successfully. The span of control is too broad. So we have to create distributed nodes of expertise, and those are our Scrum leads and in some cases our product owners. We have certification. So I know there's external certification. We've created one that's very specifically tailored for our use case, and that's our internal certification. So that's very structured, and we try to make sure that every team has a certified Scrum lead and product owner, and that has multiple steps involved, including an observation phase where one of the coaches must watch them do the thing and give them feedback and work with them until they exhibit some knowledge in that area. Another one is bots. I created Slack bots that will literally go remind people, you know, hey, your product owner is not certified. You might want to nudge them towards this content. Or, you know, we have for sprint planning, I'll dive a little bit into the metrics we look at, but in one case, one that I'm passionate about is the forecast ratio, the say-do ratio. So if we have people doing sprint planning and they haven't yet committed their sprint, that will sort of mess with that metric a little bit. It can equal a 0 value, which throws off an average that we watch for. So I'll have a bot that will notify Scrum leads that their sprint has started and they have not yet committed to the work. So we use basically anything we can all the time to try to nudge people towards some of the behaviors associated with the methodology. Oh, there we go. So the metrics, these are very important to us. These are the measurable parts that we have included in the organization's objectives for the year, the measures that we call them. So we call them the Agile Health Indicator. It's something like 24 different metrics that we're able to gather, and then we create a holistic value, and then we have sort of a maturity model based on those values. So this is
Zohar, you have a question here. I encouraged people to use the raise hand feature in Zoom.
Okay, sorry, I can't see it. I just see my presentation, so please call it out.
Yeah, Marge?
Yeah, just a quick question. Since you have so many teams, are you actually assigned to them, or are you available by on demand? Just curious.
It's a good question. So it's sort of like that portfolio of services as a coach. It's all of the above. So we're available through all of the channels, through the office hours, ad hoc requests, and then we do offer for a more protracted engagement with a team. We offer what I call embedded coaching, and this is where for around a quarter, ideally, I would become a part of that team and work more closely with them to achieve certain objectives specific to that team.
Wow,
So,
very nice. Thank you.
You're welcome. That one's tough, and I'll talk a little bit more about that maybe at the end. How we got there was kind of interesting, and then how effective we are trying to embed with teams is also sort of a rate limiting thing.
Yeah, it's nice to hear you get the best of both worlds. Some internal coaches are strictly assigned to certain initiatives, and then they could be pulled, right, on demand. It sounds like you have a nice balance of the two. Very good.
We try to balance it. Again, it's like
Yeah.
everything is an issue of scale within this org.
Right.
We get pulled into sort of targeted initiatives. Sometimes they'll have a massive project that didn't go as planned. And they'll say, can you facilitate the retrospective, or a series of retrospectives about why this thing didn't go as planned.
Yeah. Very nice.
I'm using that euphemistically. So let's see. The metrics, I'm really passionate about the metrics. It's something I check like all the time and on the weekends, and celebrate things moving up by 1/100th of a point sometimes. These 24 metrics are kind of bucketized into different areas, and some of them are about productivity. There are things related to age of bugs. There are metrics related to sprint forecast ratio, the say-do ratio. There are others about throughput for the Kanban teams. There are some that are more subjective, and I think those are really interesting as well. So as most of you have probably seen, to get subjective data, it's really hard. It's usually survey based, right? And people hate surveys, and to try to get them to do the surveys in a meaningful way is challenging. So it's something we still wrestle with. But if you are able to get that data, we try to use that. And something I find interesting is that subjective data exists in tension with other data. Like the good questions, I think, exist in tension deliberately with each other. So if you have a question, for instance, about work-life balance, and you can sacrifice work-life balance to boost temporarily productivity. Like, I'm going to have everyone work through the weekends. We're going to go 24/7 on this project. And productivity will go up for a little while, but the subjective scores will probably go way down. So it's by design that they exist in tension, and it's try to foster those discussions about some of those subjective things. When we want them in a retro to talk about how they're doing as a team, those subjective questions can help that discussion, I think. Another one that's listed here, and it's relatively new for us, is backlog ranking. Trying to encourage people to actually have backlogs, and finding a way within the system of record to measure that, I think is quite interesting. So for next year, we're trying to instill some mechanisms where we can measure what was the backlog rank of the work items that were closed, to give people a way to have that discussion and say, hey, like, a lot of the work coming through, it's side loading into sprints. It is unplanned work, and it represents this percentage of the work that we do. And so having a backlog rank, if it's 0, for instance, that would mean it possibly didn't go through a backlog. And if you go one level deeper and say, well, the team is closing stories with like a really low backlog rank rather than a high backlog rank, what does that mean? So that might be a good discussion for those teams. Maybe they're cherry picking, maybe they're not understanding the priority, or pulling from the top. So something to consider. It's a little bit tough to do. You have to have a system of record that will allow for that data. So this is the last part, and I added it because I think it's really important. I notice people don't do this, which is weird to me. I like celebrating. I think the work will never end. Like, if you're good at doing work, if a team is good at doing work, if a coach is good at doing work, more work will be coming your way. It just never stops. The better you get, the more work there is. And so it will never end. And I think to just keep going and keep trying to chip away at that mountain, it might not be very fulfilling if you don't stop and celebrate the milestones. So this part, to me, is really important, to sort of designate the milestones that you will call success. And it's a good discussion to have with your stakeholders, with those leaders, and say, hey, at what point are we going to celebrate? And call that a milestone, and have them recognize it, and send out those celebratory messages. A lot of times people just need good news. and it feels good to hit the milestone. So I like calling those out. I like celebrating them. I think finding the people who are exemplars of a certain thing and celebrating them and connecting them with other people who need help within that particular area. That's one of the way we build our community of practice. And I don't know, this to me is the sort of gratification loop within this whole sort of never-ending process. One last thing I'll say is, it just came up today. We were doing some annual planning for next year's initiatives for Agile for this org. And they said, do we want to propagate this year's, which was for certain measures? They said it was, we created a threshold, like 90% of teams should have a certified, Scrum lead and product owner, for instance. And they said, do we need to propagate that for next year? And my answer is yes, because we see regression. So you might get over that threshold, but then there's churn and teams change and people leave and it will dip back down. So it's that battle to fight off entropy is forever. And so because it will never end and because you must always stay above a certain threshold, it's important to call it the milestones and celebrate them. So with that, I will take a breath and a sip of wine and stop talking.
You got a hand raiser here.
Okay.
Mr. Giles?
Yeah, hey, thanks, Zohar. This was really enlightening. I'm asking myself this question that can you talk about kind of what is the kind of backdrop in terms of why they brought the 4 coaches? Because I would think that a company like Salesforce would have Agile as sort of like, hey, this is the way that we ought to be doing things. Was it that they were having trouble executing? And then the other question I have for you is, so you're not part of these individual 200 or so teams. So do you sit in kind of like a program delivery verticals? What is that sort of the mandate you get the ability to go ahead and do this? Does that hopefully that helps? I don't know if that question makes sense or not. So
I think so. So I heard 2 questions. One was about maybe the history of Agile at Salesforce and how it came in. And I won't do the best job of this. I have some colleagues who can talk about it in great detail. It was don't quote me on this, but the light version is I think back in the history of Salesforce, there was a time where they have a release cadence and they had to miss a release because issues of scale and chaos prevented things from being in the state they needed to be. And at that point, they recognized a need to change and they recognized a need to become an Agile company. So it was sort of rolled out as the company standard at that point, and it's been increasing since then. Within the part of the company that I work in, again, I think it was just scaling up and they realized there's a need for some kind of defined methodology. It was chaos. They have people coming in from multiple companies. There was no standard. It was
kind of like their version of it all. It was like kind of inconsistent. Yeah, right. Yeah. Okay.
You still see it. They're like, oh, I like to use Post-its, or I like to write it on a napkin, or I like to use spreadsheets, or I like to use Quip or Jira, and everyone just comes in with their own way of doing things. And there was no shared way of reporting on collaborative, org-wide initiatives. There are questions like, as a 2,000 person org, how do we know our capacity to do work over time? How do we know how much we can deliver this year? Do we need more people? Do we need less people? Should we take on more work or less work? Can we commit to delivering this in Q4? Those questions are really tough without having some kind of standardized system in place. So because of that, we're in the past, we would just ask these, good questions, like trying to be very Socratic and be good coaches and not being very directive. More recently, because of the scale, we're realizing there's a need to standardize on some things to function at scale. So that was one part of it. And then to your question about the embedding with teams, the history of that came about where we were trying to do certifications at scale, and the end of the certification is an observation process. And we said, okay, we got to let's do some math here. We have X number of teams and this many Scrum leads and product owners. And so we have the 2 coaches at the time, and we're going to have to do this many observations per week to get it done. And it was like a spreadsheet exercise. And then what we found, because we set a high watermark, we want all teams to have a certified Scrum lead and product owner. And then what we found was, in some cases, we were doing 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 observations of the same person, and it's just not getting there. Their team was not doing Agile. And at first we thought like, oh man, these people are blowing our numbers. we're not going to get to 100% because these people are really just applying friction to this whole get to 100% thing. And then we had to catch ourselves and say, well, wait a minute, those are the people that actually really need help. The ones that just burn right through the process and we check the box and certify them with no effort, they actually don't need it. It was too easy. We need to focus on the ones that are taking 6, 7, 8, 9 observations. They're the ones that truly need coaching help. And so that's where we kicked off this embedded coaching initiative. And we said, for those teams that really need help, we're just going to go all in and become a part of the team. And it takes more cycles. It's a lot, but that's where we're needed. So it's worth applying some energy to, I think.
Thank you, Zohar. That's great.
Sure.
Next question, we got Hassan.
Yeah, thanks. Zohar, you mentioned about using matrices to track the progress of what you are coaching. So I'm curious about what kind of matrices are you using? What kind of data are you tracking to measure your progress? So can you share more details on that?
Yes. Let me think what I could share that's not too internal. I guess it would be those around 24 metrics that we're able to gather from our system of record. So that's where I was talking about the subjective metrics, the ones that come from a survey, the things like average age of bugs, number of investigations, the sprint forecast numbers for a given team over the last 6 sprints. How many of the stories that they committed to did they deliver? And so it's all of those sort of metrics that roll up into one value that we call the Agile Health Indicator. It gives us sort of a maturity model, because based on that scale, we're able to, so every team can actually see their numbers and they can see them trend over time. So point in time data sometimes can be fallacious, but looking at the trends and looking at them, how they interrelate with each other is usually interesting at the team level and at the org level.
So that's more of like, if you're following Scrum, then we are tracking the commitments and other stuff that is compliant with the Scrum. If they are following daily Scrum or not, if they are doing sprint planning as per the core values and principles or not.
We don't track the meetings per se, but it would be more about throughput, velocity, velocity in the sense of, is it consistent? If we have a high degree of velocity variation, then that, depending on the range, that will sort of trigger on the Agile health. So what else? Throughput, sprint forecast, average age of bugs.
So that's more of like, don't you think that more of like in the line of project management? And for me, if we're already doing that, that's why. So I'm trying to focus on making the teams follow the core values and principles, rather than looking at these data. If they do the things like, for example, if they are doing sprint planning, they were just committing to what we need to do. I'm in the sprint planning sessions, I'm letting them empower themselves to discuss how they want to do this as well, rather than discussing the what part. So these kind of things, are they traceable, or do you have any like suggestions to track these things at an organizational level? Because we are talking about organizational transformation over here.
Some of the other values that we track are, do they have a certified Scrum lead? Do they have a certified product owner? Do they have a documented definition of ready, definition of done? Do they have a documented working agreement? Some of those, I think, get into less of the project management and more of sort of the team health and I think Agile related concepts. So we track all of that. All of that is calculated and rolls up into one holistic score, which is interesting.
Right.
I think, and it's good for team discussion. But the other part of that is we've noticed sometimes a team can have a high score on that maturity model, but they're low in one sort of key metric. The one that I've been harping on is the sprint forecast. If they're habitually overcommitting and their sprint forecast is in the red, then that might be obfuscated by, say, a high score overall. But so we now call that out independently and say, not only do we want all teams across the whole org to be in the green for that holistic score, but we also want them to all have certified product owners and Scrum leads. We also want all of them to be in the green for their say-do ratio as represented by that sprint forecast number. We want all of them to have the majority of their work flowing through a backlog. So it's a little bit of that helps.
I think so that answers my question, because you're clearly focusing on the forecasting part, where the Scrum guide also emphasizes on that you need to do better forecasting. So
I might be bringing it more than others in my group, because for me, it's one that I'm passionate about, because I think if the say-do ratio is low, like let's say it was hypothetically 33% for the org, then what that means is, if a team commits to delivering something to you in a given sprint, there's a 1 in 3 chance of telling you the truth. It blows your inter-team dependencies. If you're trying to plan for Q4, then you can't do any kind of accurate forecasting. Nothing you say you'll do in Q4 is that cone of uncertainty is like 180 degrees, because you can't even trust what a team would tell you for next sprint if you're at 33% of say-do. So I tend to get pretty passionate about that number coming up for the org, but it's just one of 24 metrics. We could go deep into probably any of them, and they all have sort of downstream impact and other effects to the whole org.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sure.
Next question comes from Marge.
Yep. I won't take too much time. Just one final question. I'm interested in knowing how you organize multiple Scrum teams and coordinate between them. You may not be able to share your scaling framework. Just wanted to see how Salesforce tackles that part. Yeah.
Okay. And let me see if I understand it right. I tend to focus, if we're talking about work between orgs, do you mean specifically with regards to interdependencies between teams, or
let's
shared
say
backlog, or?
Yeah, let's say you have a multi-million-dollar initiative where you have 10 Scrum teams, maybe a senior IT leader is managing 10 Scrum teams. How do you go about doing that, right? A lot of companies say, okay, you have to go to save, right? Or you have to do less. Was there ever that challenge with Salesforce that you have to follow an industry framework, otherwise you're bound to fail or something,
I'll qualify, we have the same struggles and probably aren't doing it in any kind of perfect way. But the things I find myself saying in those circumstances are, I tend to stick with the basics. So I still try to discourage the idea of a project-specific leader pushing an urgent project to multiple teams and trying to sort of jump the queue and sideload work unplanned into team sprints. I try to resist the anti-pattern of having them cherry pick a principal engineer or build an all-star team to deliver the project and blow up every other team and send them back to a forming state. Like all of those sort of anti-patterns, I discourage and say, first of all, honor the teams. The teams have been working together. Good teams that have been working together for a long time can figure out anything. If it's a initiative that needs to be spread across multiple teams, focus on the portfolio rather than blowing up the teams. And so it becomes a portfolio discussion. How do you farm out that portfolio in a reasonable way that doesn't serialize it and create unnecessary interdependencies across those teams? And that's where the intelligence of the brain trust needs to be applied. how do you carve it up in a meaningful way to make it as independent as possible across those multiple teams? Another thing I see all the time is you get, product owner sort of craziness. I say whatever is happening early on in the process to carve up that initiative, it still needs to land in the backlog of those respective teams. And there still needs to be the one product owner who owns that backlog.
Yeah.
They can have all the conversations they need to. All the product owners can talk as much as necessary, but in the end, it needs to end up in the backlogs in a prioritized way with the single product owner for that team understanding it. All those product owners have to have all those conversations all the time.
Yeah.
So that's
Very good. That was good. Your presentation was amazing. Yeah, really opened up. Yeah. Very good.
The last piece is, I'm available through all the normal channels. So if anyone wants to talk more, connect on LinkedIn, hit me up. It's Zohar Mann, M-A-N-N, and I'm happy to talk about this stuff all the time.
Yeah.
Cool.
Thanks, Mark. All right, big round of applause for Zohar. Oh, Zohar.
Oh, we have one more, Michael.
Oh, we got one more question. Sorry, yeah, Michael. We'll go one more question, then we can go to open space activities. So Michael, take us away with one more question, please.
Thank you, Zohar. Great presentation. Really appreciate the time and the effort that you put to provide as much details as you could provide. Had a question about like forecasting versus completed, the different metrics, like that all makes sense. 24 separate indicators. Totally get it. The more detail, the better you can identify how to improve over time, right? Was curious, and I kind of went to Marge's question as well. How do you prioritize before it comes to the backlog? Is there a PI? And maybe you can't share if it's safe or less, whatever. I'm curious, how do you have all the different owners, all the different leaders within the different products or the different requests kind of prioritize amongst themselves quarterly, annually, semi? I was curious about the frequency that they all get together and to really flesh out the strategy before you can execute.
So this hails back to that V2 mom part of the presentation where when I said, like, are we on the same page? The V2 mom is that plan for the year, and it can be changed. There has to be a lot of discussion with the relevant parties and the necessarily like the budget components and the operational folks, and everybody has to have that talk. But it lands in the V2 mom. That is that strategic plan for the year. And that is where people need to refer back when they have these priority discussions. So when they have that massive initiative that came in, and sometimes they come mid-year, right? They're unplanned. Some massive threat might change the landscape and change the plan. All the people who do the annual planning will have to reconvene to have that discussion and reprioritize. And then that fans out into the org and the necessary teams that will get the components. Yeah, it's one other piece of that sort of breaking it into its parts and fanning it out to the relevant teams is escalation paths. Maybe this is the same everywhere, but what I see is people just escalate to the highest level of management they can get the ear of. And what we're trying to shift towards is if it is something about the portfolio, any portfolio or any project, and it is not yet in a sprint, then it goes up a product ownership escalation path. And we have that. We have a whole org of PMs, and there's a person in charge of that org. So we want people to escalate priority concerns up that chain. If it's something tactical, if it's related to in the sprint, interdependencies, anything about execution, then we want it to go up a Scrum lead escalation path. Scrum lead talk to other Scrum lead. And only other certain circumstances should go up like a management chain. So we're just trying to nudge some of those escalations to those two different paths rather than just up the management path.
Cool. Great, appreciate that. Thank you.
Oh, sure, anytime.
Thanks. All right, round of applause for Zohar now. Thank you so much for presenting and telling us your story. That was pretty awesome. I'm going to turn off the recording.